I know nothing, nothing. I know nothing, nothing.
Hi, Richard. How are you?
Gerald, how are you today?
Good. Let me start and introduce you to my podcast.
Okay.
Richard Luthmann is an investigative reporter who specializes in exposing judicial misconduct, family court secrecy, unconstitutional gag orders, and retaliation against litigants, whistleblowers, and journalists. His reporting has examined judges and court systems across the country using filings, transcripts, recording, financial records, judicial grievances, medical evidence, and firsthand accounts. In Connecticut, a handwritten note Lutham covered became central to a judicial recusal controversy. In New York, his investigations have scrutinized politically connected judges and the watchdog agency responsible for policing them. Lutham publishes through This Is For Real, New York News Press, Florida Gulf News, and the Family Court Circuits. His work rests on blunt proposition. Judges exercise extraordinary power, and no robe should place that power beyond investigation. Before we begin, I would like to state that my book, The Judge's Oath, which is a memoir written to call for court reform, is dedicated to the removal of Judge Donna Geck out of Santa Barbara for clear and easy to prove judicial fraud that damaged my career and reputation for a lifetime. She has a history of ignoring and hiding evidence, perverting the law, and making up her own facts, like many judges, but she is one of the worst in Santa Barbara. Consequently, several people, including one father who is concerned that Judge Geck has put his daughter, in danger of abuse after spending $600,000 for attorneys. He is in the process of gathering signatures to remove her from the bench. You can buy my book at Amazon. I also have petitions at change.org. So, welcome, Richard Lutham, to the Judge's Oath.
Oh,
Thank
thank you
you
for
for
having me.
joining me.
Yeah, no problem. My pleasure.
So, maybe you could begin by telling us what started your journey in writing about judges and investigating judges.
I'm a former lawyer, and I actually probably about 5 years now of doing heavy duty investigative journalism. I started with Frank Parlato, who's a well known investigative reporter at the Frank Report. And he does a whole bunch of family court and judicial investigations and that type of work. And I worked with him, and I still do. I collaborate with him on certain issues. And I also collaborate with Michael Volpe, who's a longtime family court journalist, and others. And I do a lot of work. Family court is one, but it fits under the umbrella of really what I do. And I look at weaponized justice. I look at lawfare. I look at when the system is not working, why isn't it working? What's causing, for lack of a better term, the corruption? What's causing, you put one in and you don't get one out? And so a lot of what I write about and what I investigate is that family court's a large portion of that, because I don't think there's any court in this country that is as crooked as the family courts. I have people that tell me, they're in the family court, they've been in family court for years, they're going broke, and they wish that they had been charged with a crime because at least they'd have rights. So there are issues with the courts, but it's not just the family courts. It's the system itself, and it's the judicial system, but it's also political. It gets into the legal and the political kind of go back and forth on a lot of different things. And so I've been doing exposés on different people. And if anybody's out there that has a corruption story, I will take a look at it. I love taking a look at things. I get people call me all the time with different things. But as far as your audience is concerned, the judge's oath, I guess the place where I can start to talk about is some of the work that I've done. I've uncovered a lot of judges. I've just bad decisions, shady decisions, things that just can't be explained. But I think the worst offender, from my perspective, and you talk about what you know. I'm from New York originally. I live in Florida now, but it's New York and the New York system. And there's a man named Robert H. Tembekian, and he's not a judge. He's more important than a judge. He's the man who tells the public that he will police the judges. He is the director of the New York State Commission on Judicial Conduct, and he's the watchdog. And the problem is that case after case shows that Tembekian and the Commission on Judicial Conduct has become the courthouse shield as opposed to the watchdog. And I've written several articles about him, where we talk about his conflicts. The man has some real conflicts with how he operates. He has an advisory position. He's a public employee. He's supposed to be a watchdog, but he has an advisory position as an attorney and a counsel to a large group that is based in Armenia, and it's basically a hedge fund or an acquisition fund. And some of the work that they do relates to getting approvals from Putin and the Russian government.
Wow.
So you got to understand that it can't be too far off that Russia is not known for the rule of law, right? And so he's advising his people over there, and he's a partner or a principal in this company, about how to kiss up to one of the great oppressors of the modern age, Vladimir Putin. And you wonder that if pay for play is that that native to him, is that he's so fluent in that language, what's he doing in the People's Republic of New York? And so I've written several articles about that. How can this guy moonlight as a Putin, for lack of a term, a Putin kiss ass, and also be the guy that's going to tell the people in New York, oh no, our judges have integrity. Our judges are on the up and up. We're going to investigate all these complaints. When you look at the complaints and you put them next to each other, and there's a litany of New York judges that we talk about. I've covered Ronald Castorina, who was in Staten Island, New York. He's now been moved to Manhattan. He's in Manhattan now. Another Manhattan judge named Kathleen Waterman Marshall. There's horrendous judges that if you just Google any of those names, they send people to Rikers Island, but they don't send people to Rikers Island that are criminals. They send people to Rikers Island for contempt orders. What are the contempt orders?
Oh my gosh.
I can't liquidate my retirement fund quickly enough. Okay, well, we'll help you out. We'll send you to Rikers for 6 days. That's the type of people we're dealing with. And I can talk about them, but Tembekian is their personal protection. And you send a complaint, and you would think that you have a judge that didn't have any semblance of due process in the court, because most people can understand. The housewife can understand whether she has had notice and an opportunity to be heard, when she feels that she was respected when she walked into the courtroom. And most of the reason why people are upset with the judicial system is because they feel like they weren't respected. And most of the time, they're right. They did not get their notice, and they did not get an opportunity to be heard in the courts. And the buck stops with the judges.
Well,
right?
I would add that, I personally have sent many complaints into the judicial watchdog groups here in California, and I'm amazed. I mean, what I've experienced is not just being heard, but hiding evidence. Like in my case, they hid 2 court orders and called them confidential so the public can't see it. And they've a federal judge actually modified the court docket to say 2 cases were similar to each other and they weren't. So I've observed just in-your-face judicial fraud, saying there's no evidence in the face of 62 pages of evidence. And
Yeah,
Judge Donagek has a history of doing that to many
I've
people, but it's
I've run into that.
not
I've
just
run into
Judge
that.
Geck.
They have all, not just New York, California, obviously, other places have
Yeah,
a form letter that they send out. You'll
yeah,
send in, documents, 100, 200 pages worth of documents that prove the fraud. And then they'll send you back a form letter, 2 paragraphs that says we found nothing. And, I said Castorina before. I'd say that because I sent in a sworn grand jury testimony that guy took, the judge. And I sent messenger messages that directly contradicted it, that showed actual perjury. Hundreds of pages. It was filed court documents. It's on file in Albany Supreme Court, and they go blind. It's out of control. Now I work with and I cover several really good groups with the Family Court. One of them is the Family Court Fraud Warrior Project, and the founder there, David Weigel, likes to say that it's a town with no police. When you're dealing with the judges, that's what it is. There's nobody polices
right.
there's no cops. So if you have a town with no cops, what's going to happen? It's going to be run by, the biggest narcissists, the biggest, maniacs, the 10% of the people that are the worst. And I think that's what we kind of have in our judiciary. It's a sad and sorry state of affairs. There are good judges out there, but for every good judge, you could, for 10 good judges, you only need is one maniac, and that's what becomes the problem.
And appeals don't work as I found. They actually hide and protect the lower courts. That is my experience. I had, for example, in one of my cases, Judge Geck said that my cases that were dismissed without prejudice, where I proved that I met my legal burden, were frivolous. And then when I appealed, the appellate court said, oh, they weren't dismissed without prejudice. They were dismissed with prejudice. No, they weren't, And so the appellate court is not an efficient watchdog either.
I just ran into that issue with actually Julie Holborn, she's a California journalist out in Orange County. And Julie was covering the recalls out in California, the failed recalls at this point. But the point is that when you have all these problems and all these families with the same issues with the judges, and appeals aren't meaningful relief. They're time consuming, they're slow, and they don't get to facts. You can only bring an appeal on an issue of law. So if the judges ignored facts, if they lose files, if for some reason the transcripts come back and they miss whole things that were said in court, you have no relief in an appellate court. It's almost a meaningless type thing to have an appeal, especially in a family law, a guardianship type case, conservatorship type case. It's out of control. And so the recall process is something that they had looked at, and that's a whole other story. That's a fully political issue. But in order to get a recall, think of it, Orange County, in order to get a recall petition in, you need to get over 100,000 signatures. Wow. That is not a small feat.
Right.
But by way of example, Orange County is one county in California, right? It's a populous county, but to get somebody to qualify for the ballot in New York for governor of the entire state of New York, you only need 50,000 signatures. So it's one of those situations where even popular action, political action, there is great impediments to the judges. The judges are in this the judge club. They're protected. And that becomes a big problem.
So I didn't realize that in appellate, when you appeal, that you can't appeal facts. So if they make up facts, you can't. That's not appealable. Only if
the factual record
make
is
mistakes
set
in law.
The factual record is set with the trial court. So your remedy for a factual record that's incorrect is at the trial court. So whether you have new evidence or whether you have something that you have to move to re-argue or to renew or to reconsider or a new evidentiary motion, you have to bring that to the trial court in the first instance. If they got it wrong because of the facts, you don't appeal. You have to bring one of those motions to re-argue or renew or reconsider. If they got it wrong with the law, then you have to get to the appeals court. But the appeals court takes forever, and you know how it is. It's a matter of interpretation a lot of times with these laws. You could read the law and you could think the law means what it says, and common sense says it says one thing, and then the judges get done with it, and it's something totally different.
Right.
So that
So,
becomes an
so
issue.
what chance do we have to maybe have legislation where we hold these judges responsible for to some level of consequence for blatantly lying or hiding evidence or, something provable? How do
You got
we
to
how
think
do we
you have a
change
judge
the
club, right?
system?
You have a judge
What?
club, right?
Yeah,
And a lot of those legislators, they're lawyers, and a lot of those legislators want to get
right.
into that judge club,
Yeah,
right?
right.
So you already have an uphill battle there because of the number of lawyers that you have in government. Political people too end up becoming judges more than anybody else,
Hmm,
and political people end up having less legal ability than most
right.
of the people. You have people that'll sit around and let's say they work 10 years chief of staff for a congressperson or for a state senator or something like that, and a judicial nomination comes up. They have a law license, and they say, "Oh, you want to be a judge? Oh yeah, sure, I'll be a judge." And so they go
Wow.
in, they get put in and become a judge. They have no practical training, right? As a lawyer, right? A
Oops, sorry.
prosecutor, a public defender, anything like that. They didn't work in the court system in the administration. They didn't work for a judge as a court attorney, or a court clerk. They go to the courthouse and they get a few weeks of training, on the job training. Then they get thrown into a part. Most likely, the part is a family court part,
Hmm,
or a conservative part, some type of part like that, because that's rookie hazing. When you first get in there, they put them in there, and then that's where people go before they get to the criminal division or the commercial division and the civil division. Before they get to the big time divisions, they end up in one of those spots. And this is more in the state courts.
hmm.
It doesn't happen as much in the federal courts. It can happen in the federal courts, a purely political appointment, but it happens more in the state courts. California is a good example. You have somebody who works for a state senator. You have somebody who works for whatever, for in the executive branch. They make them a judge. And you look back, and that's a problem. So you're saying, are we going to go to get legislative action and get legislators to change the rules? And
Right.
when these judges are themselves political creatures out of the political machines, right?
And that's
So
such a
that
shame because
is a
family
problem.
law affects our children. And my advice to people in my book is not to go to the courts, to figure things out yourself, because these attorneys say they don't purposely create chaos in the family, but I disagree. The more chaos they create, the more money they make. So
That's
it's
important to say.
and some people, a gentleman spent $600,000. I couldn't imagine on attorneys, and now he's concerned that Judge Gecka's put his daughter in a situation where it's proven she's being abused. And so he's fighting to get her off the bench. And several of us are behind him completely. And but we must have some hope to be able to change this system. Like I'm in court right now, and I didn't want to go into court again. I have extensive legal experience at this point, but I'm hoping, I don't know what else to do. And it's crazy for me to go to court with the experience I've had, but I'm hoping there's some honest judges. But the attorneys, they just lie so boldly that I think, why would they lie unless they feel like they have a judge in their pocket? What gives you hope that we could change the system?
One of the groups that I cover and that I work with is called the Foundation for the Child Victims of the Family Courts. And that's the
Okay.
executive director there is Jill Jones Soderman. And she actually has published on this lawyers as liabilities, and so that becomes the problem is that you have a lawyer, especially in the family court, in the insular place like family court. The goal of the lawyer is to get somebody appointed, a guardian ad litem, an attorney for the child, some type of litigation manager, this, that, or the other. So the goal is to get an appointment, and that appointment that comes in is paid by the courts, paid by the taxpayers, and then the goal of that person is to get more appointments, to get therapists, to get case managers, to get this, to get that. It's a never-ending parade,
Oh, yeah.
right?
It's
So
amazing.
you're
Yeah.
100% right that the system is somewhat to be avoided at all costs, and the lawyers are the entree. The lawyer becomes the liability, and the judge to a certain extent too, because it's much easier for a judge to point to a report that some third party made as opposed to make a decision on their own, right? What judge wants to make a decision when they can say, I relied upon the findings and the rulings of all these other people? So that is a problem because it is, you're not treated like a human being. You're treated like cattle.
Right.
You're treated like, a number in the situation. And becomes a one-size-fits-all system that's meant to extract the greatest amount of value out of you. And if you have money, great, they'll take your money. And if you don't have money, then guess who's paying? You and me and everybody else, because there's a whole shadow system that people don't realize in the courts with Title IV, the Social Security Act and other federal statutes, federal funding. And that goes to pay all sorts of people, especially indigent people. When you have child support, or domestic violence, you have adoption, or you have foster care, that type of stuff. You ever see the situation where you have two parents, you have grandparents in the picture, and the kids end up in foster care? You ever wonder why that happens? Because in common sense, you wouldn't think that would happen. If you had somebody that could take care of the kids somewhere, then that's where the kids would go. There are monetary incentives to put kids in foster care for the judicial system, right?
Well,
that's how they cover their budget gaps with the federal money. And so these children are being treated like inventory in this system.
Well, and I've heard this one gentleman who wants to put in the energy to recall Judge Geck is doing investigation of how many kids are put in the hands of pedophiles, people who abuse children. Like when you take them away from their parents, are you putting them in a situation where they'll be in danger?
I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The family courts are connected to designer child trafficking. Weigel, who I mentioned before, actually talks a lot about this. David Weigel, the Family Court Fraud Warrior Project, designer child trafficking. We had Bailey Templeton, who was a former candidate for Illinois state representative, and she was in the foster care system. This was her big issue. She made requests to the DFS in Illinois saying, where are the foster children? We have 300 missing foster children. You would think that would raise alarm bells. The foster system says we can't account for 300 children. You would think that would raise alarm bells. Yeah. But what is happening is this is designer child trafficking. They are feeding the pedophile rings. And it happens, I hate to say it, more often than not in the blue states. The states that are the culprits of this, that have documented issues: Illinois, Georgia, Connecticut, Maryland. These states have situations where the foster care system, New York, California, you name the states, and they all end up being these blue states. I had one person who knows this very well, former law enforcement, that tells me Maryland, especially, any place where they have a big port, they have children, especially white children, at about 11 or 12 years old, are prime because they get put into the container ports, and then they're shipped overseas, and then they are becoming a sex slave in the Middle East or in Asia. So these are their cases where this happens. And when you think about it, foster kids, they disappear. Who's going to be asking for them, right? So especially if you have a white foster child, that's something that, and it's concerning that, Georgia had the situation where you have hundreds of kids that they can't account for.
That's
and it's not like an alarm bell. You have one child that's gone and you have an Amber Alert, right? And but when you have hundreds of children that are gone in the foster care system, it's kind of apathy, because there are very powerful moneyed interests, that are, into that deviancy. Tim Tebow has done work on this, and others have done work on trying to bring this. And Mel Gibson did work on this to try to bring this into the forefront and bring it into the social consciousness. But people don't realize that there are really sick and evil people out there, and the family court is one of the pipelines to these very, very evil people.
Yeah.
And if that's the one thing, if we can talk about reform, if we can at least, I don't even say stop, I would say even slow down that pipeline, that designer child trafficking pipeline, I think we'd be doing God's work. Just even slow it down a little bit.
Yeah.
Save children's lives. That should be the point, but it's not. It's a very, it's an evil system in many respects.
Well, I think it's great that you're speaking out. Recently, like I had mentioned, I'm in court again, and I did not want to be. And then I was banned from X. And I'm like, why? I have very few followers. I'm just building up my podcast. So why would I be banned from X? I'm like, I wonder if the attorneys on the opposing side did that. Do you have any problems? And I'm actually
I'll tell you who
challenging
did that
X.
on X.
I'm
I'll tell
challenging
you
X because they didn't
I'll tell
tell
you who
me
did that on
why.
X.
You
I'll tell
would?
you what that came from. I'll tell you what the X thing came from. A
Okay.
woman named Linda Yaccarino. She's not there anymore. She was an NBC executive, and Elon hired her to do uh, uh, X, Twitter into X when he purchased it. And the X's thing now is to be palatable for advertising. So when you start talking about topics that are not palatable to advertising, the algorithm starts to punish you, right? And then if you get punished enough in the algorithm, they deplatform you. Okay,
But
that was
without notice, without telling you why, and their policy says they're supposed to tell you why. I sent them a legal letter asking them, well, why did you do this to me? What did I say? Because you have Iran posting their Lego movies on. You have Tucker Carlson on, you have, so many people. So I was surprised that I would get punished because I'm like so far not popular yet in terms of, followers and things, but I'm working on it.
it's the algorithm, and it's all about happy and safe for advertisement. That's really what it is. Yaccarino put it in place. It's a real disappointment to me because Elon Musk talks a lot about being a free speech absolutist. But when you look at how that algorithm on X functions, it's the furthest thing from the truth. I ran into the same thing from you. My personal X account was I had it for probably a decade and a half. From when Twitter first started, and they shut it down.
Huh.
Because I was getting into edgy material about the courts and corruption and everything else. I have an X account for dissemination of my media properties, and I disseminate on that, but that's just dissemination. So I really don't engage as much as I had in the past with the X platform, and it's a real turnoff. But it's sad and it's scary that this has happened, but it's a larger issue too about the media and how the media covers the family courts, how the media covers child trafficking, how the media covers some of these issues, and the mainstream media doesn't cover this.
Right.
And one of the attorneys actually one of the writers, one of the great journalists that I work with, is a man named Michael Volpe, and Volpe covered one of the most heinous cases in America ever in family court called the Rucky case up in Minnesota, and that got a little bit of it got a Dateline coverage. It got some other stuff, some national coverage, Dan Abrams. But their coverage was not only plain vanilla, but it was wrong in many aspects. A lot of the crucial facts were wrong, and they ended up taking the institutional side, the side of the judges, the side, but the side that wasn't borne out by the facts.
Right.
Volpe actually wrote a book about the Rucky case. They've done some good media about that. But that happens all the time. There's almost an unspoken word that the mainstream media will not cover family court cases. And so it becomes problematic. You get to worry about what happens with the family court. That's why, a lot of people come to me and, I'll cover family court cases. I will get your story out there, and Volpe will, Frank Parlato will, and a few others, Julie Holborn will. But there are only so many independent journalists like us out there. The large, mainstream houses don't cover family court. It's a scary situation. And then you go to ProPublica, right, or you go to any investigative shop like that, they'll do a family court article, but it's topical. They'll do a topical article, and then they'll do one, and they'll move along. They won't do an in-depth investigation into one judge or one system or one thing and stay on it. They won't do a 10-piece, investigation over a period of months, or like Volpe, anything that comes out on Ruck, he still talks about it. It's almost 10 years later. We're still talking about that case and where things are. You don't see that in the mainstream media. That's why if you need to go media for family court or for any of this stuff, you have to go independent media. And that's the shame, because like you said, X is closing down a lot of the independent media outlets.
Well, maybe you could go into where you post your things in alternative media, why you choose them, and what kind of distribution you get. Because in my experience in dealing with the courts, which is why I started speaking out like 10 years ago when I went through family law, I did a show on public TV in Santa Barbara, and as soon as I spoke out, I was treated fairly. So I feel like it's almost essential to be able to speak out when you're in court so that you are treated fairly. So maybe you could educate us on where you post, why you've chosen those streams, and what kind of distribution you get.
I have probably one of the most important properties for family court media, and that's called thefamilycircus.com.
Okay.
It's been family court. It's been around for a decade, and it covers all sorts of family court issues. And it was born out of Connecticut, but it covers national issues. And I get people that call me up with crazy cases all the time. It's a family court circus. The family court is a circus. That's what it
Right.
is. It's out of control. One case that I'm working on right now that I'm covering is a divorce that was finalized at the end of the Obama administration, right? Okay, and it's still going on in post judgment. When you think about that, in the first Obama administration,
Oh, wow.
2012, right? 2012, 2013. That's when it was the divorce was finalized. They went in, and within a few months they had a divorce agreement. They were legally divorced. Since 2013, it's been 13 years of post judgment. And this is the Feeney case out of Connecticut. And the husband is this. He claims to be, if you go to look at his internet, his Instagram, everywhere else, this big hedge fund guy out of Connecticut. You know, he's got plenty of money. He's doing crypto, this, that, the other thing. We have a screenshot of a crypto account, one of his crypto accounts with over $1 million in it, right? You go to his filings in the court, right? His filings for custody, the filings for the worksheets. He's showing $1,000 a month in income, $1,200 a month in income. Things that don't add up.
Right.
And you have these lies. People can lie in these courts with impunity.
Oh, that's just amazing. It's so bold and in your face, the lies at this point.
But when you think about it, he runs around. He's in Connecticut. You got to have some money to be placed in Connecticut. You have some money if you say you're a hedge fund person. And we have proof, at least apparent proof, that you have millions of dollars in accounts, or at least did it at a point in time that we can show. What happened? How can you have at that same period of time $1,000 a month, $1,200 a month in income? It's out of control. That case is what I'm covering now. Another Connecticut case with a man named Christopher Ambrose. He's one of the most vile villains of the family courts. He was a writer in Hollywood, and he got run out of town for plagiarism. So you got to understand, he's a Leonardo da Vinci of lies, right? He's Leonardo da Vinci of lies. He got run out of plagiarism out of this. He comes back to Connecticut, and he's run and he went to NYU Law School, mind you. He's educated as a lawyer. He runs the circles around the ex-wife, who was basically a teacher, right? And got her legally tagged as a domestic violence abuser, 110-pound substitute teacher, right? Out of control. The children, right, are adopted children. 2 of them have already aged out of the system. And I've interviewed one of them named Mia, and she came on and said, "My father sexually abused me."
Wow.
We have the reports that they submitted while she was a minor to Connecticut DCF about vaginal penetration. Not investigated by DCF, ignored by DCF.
Wow.
Right? And you have a situation where, especially in a place like Connecticut, Me Too, believe the victim, and yet these children are victims, and you have a narcissist employing DARVO, right? Deny, accuse, reverse victim and offender. That's the narcissist's playbook. And they hoodwink everybody. They hoodwink the court system. They hoodwink the DCF. They hoodwink the attorneys. They hoodwink the therapists. It's a disgusting situation. And that's one of the things that we cover as well on the family court circus. We've been covering that for a while.
Well,
Connecticut
my
is a federal.
question though is I had a similar situation. I was, and when going through child custody, I had a child on my own, and he didn't help me during pregnancy at all, and then immediately sued me for custody. And my son came home with a diaper rash, and all of a sudden they were accusing me of abuse. So I moved. I left Santa Barbara because of that, and always took my son to the doctor before each visit and after each visit. But I also never got child support because the people lied about income. And they didn't disclose that there was an apartment building. His ex-wife, Deborah Mullen, worked at Santa Barbara Child Support Services at the time, and they were going through a divorce. But it's not retroactive. 14 years later, when I found out the lies, there's nothing. Family law is the only venue where you can't go back and get damages for lying in the past. You can't
Well, there's
collect.
actually an exception to that.
There's
And
what?
we're looking now in Connecticut. There's a case called Billington
Yeah.
versus Billington, and there are cases on the books in other states as well, which says that when there is pervasive fraud, right, by one party,
Hmm.
especially in filing of financials and everything else, it's not an issue about another bite at the apple. That's why they don't open it up, because they're saying it's finality. This issue is bigger than finality, and when there's fraud on the court, it goes to institutional integrity. So under Billington in Connecticut, you can actually ask the court to unwind the judgment and do a full forensic accounting. Because if an individual has come in and you show that they, on a period of time, have defrauded the court, right, with their financial disclosures, which are all sworn statements, defrauded the court in their statements, defrauded the court as to their net worth, the remedy is unwinding the transaction. You can go back as far as you can. There's no statute of limitations for fraud, right, in that instance, in a lot of different areas. Like there's no statute of limitations for fraud on a tax return. There's no, if the case is still there, and even if it's in post judgment, there's no statute of limitations for going back on the fraud. In many cases, to do equitable remedies to unwind the transactions. So
I don't think there's anything like that in California. So now with AI, I've always been pro per because I could never afford attorneys at 350 to 450 an hour now in California and probably in Oregon as well. So I've always been pro per because I have a law degree and I figure I could figure it. I don't think law is that difficult really to be justify $450 an hour. But so with the advent of AI, what hope do you think that the pro per has? Do you think we have any, or that the corruption is too bad? Because if you're a pro per and you could beat an attorney who's making 450 an hour, that kind of compromises the whole legal system, doesn't it? So what do you think about AI and the pro per and our ability to win a case?
I'll tell you what I tell people who come to me for strategic consulting and for advice. I tell them, look, when you go to the courts, and you want to know how to deal with it, you could use the courts, and that's one forum and that's one venue, and you have to defend yourself. And AI is a great tool to defend yourself in court. Okay, you're not going to move downfield with it, though. You're not going to be able to defeat people in that venue because it's stacked against you. It's made for you not to be able to advance. You could hold your own, and I think AI is great for people to do that. I think that the way that you attack and you advance your position is in the media. You said it already. When people start covering cases, when judges' names and faces are in articles, when a lawyer's names or faces, when the facts are put out there for judgment by the court of public opinion, then it becomes an issue that these things want to be avoided by the courts, right? The court doesn't want to be second guessed by the public. You see how quickly when a case gets media attention and a judge has done something wrong that they get off the case right away. They try to diffuse the situation. So I think that, and Jill Jones Soderman from the Foundation for the Child Victims Family Court says this, you use the law for defense and you use the media for offense or for attack.
Right.
And that's the way to do it. it's better if you don't have to get into the situation at all. You said it first. It's kind of better. Mediation is always a great way to do things. You can have a mediated divorce if you can do things the right way, and do things, in a quasi, civil way with somebody you're divorcing. Now, that being said, sometimes it's hard. They say that the criminal law is the dredges of the earth on their best behavior, and family law is generally good people on their worst behavior. And they say that surrogate law is the best law because there's one less client to deal with. That's what they say. So, but that's what lawyers tell me. So, but that being said, there's some truth to that. That if you can avoid family court at all costs, that's the best way to do it. When you find yourself there, though, you're in it. And I'll tell you about a case that's I'm writing about this right now. I'm actually compiling some stuff. I'm going to put out a story very shortly about Congress and Max Miller. Max Miller's an Ohio congressman, and he's divorcing Emily Moreno, who is the daughter of Bernie Moreno, the state senator in Ohio. And it's become a big-time divorce case. And my whole thesis on the case is that it started as a regular divorce, and you had two law firms in there doing divorce. But then a new law firm came on, and it exploded. It became a media feeding frenzy. It became all this stuff. And my thesis, and people can disagree with me, but my thesis is the new law firm that came in to represent Emily Moreno, the wife, saw that the daughter was 2 years old and saw that they had 16 years of fees if they did it the right way and blew the case up. And it looks like it's headed that way. A situation where you could take a case like that and turn it into a 16-year gravy train. So it became not just a legal issue, but it became a legal churn and a political churn, because you have a dad's a congressman and grandpa is a senator, right? Yeah. And it turns a political churn, right? And it becomes a media churn, because the media is a frenzy on this thing. It becomes everybody's happy about this thing except for the people that are involved and the kid, especially. You got a 2-year-old kid. She's not going to know anything but crazy acrimony her whole life. And they're looking for her. They look at her like a lottery ticket until she turns to age 18. It's a meal ticket until she turns age 18. It's crazy.
Yeah, the cost of court is astronomical. I mean, my case right now is in federal court of defamation against my neighbor, Tiffany Berg. It started over a light that lights up my property. But right now she's said a lot of false things about me online, amazingly. And so part of my suit right now is defamation, because she has 1,500,000 views of defamation. And I have had a little bit of a struggle getting followers. I haven't purchased any likes or followers because I don't want to break the rules and get kicked off any other platforms. But how important is social media? How important is that for judges? Do you think they're going to look at this one woman who has 1 million views and me who has 100 views and rule in favor of the one who has so many views versus the one who has less views?
You're 100% right. Definitely change things. And I talk about this a lot in my journalism, particularly related to cancel culture. You have a defamation case. And what you got going for you in defamation is that you have something called litigation privilege. So you can say anything you want about this person that you're in a defamation case with, and they can't sue you anymore because you're already in a lawsuit. You're already there. I'm in the same situation with an individual named Dinesh Nashirvan, who is a mega influencer. Right? He came on, and what he does is he's Antifa linked. He's linked to Antifa. He's an Antifa, type. He's Iranian, so he hates the president and he hates, conservatives and everything else. And so he goes on and he attacks people. He tags them as racist. But his big thing, when people try to confront him, and I did, and other journalists have, he calls them pedophiles. He calls them child rapists. He calls them, things like that.
Wow.
With no basis whatsoever. He did it to me. So I turned around and I sued him. And I'm presently suing him in the courts, in the federal court in the Middle District of Florida in the Fort Myers division. And so you have a case. Now, this is a 2025 case, and nothing's happened for a year. This is how these cases are. They take forever. Like you said, regular cases, appeals, everything else.
Yeah.
But the social media portion of it is he's a mega influencer. So I guarantee you the judges are acting differently than they would, in a regular case where it was just, one A and B.
So are you
Because one
worried
of the
that the
social
judges will be biased towards him because he has more social media
Well, no, I
exposure
actually
than
have
you do?
I have a good following too, and I have
Okay.
a good following, especially in Southwest Florida. So I've been writing about the judges as well.
Yeah.
So they're in a situation where they're kind of like, we don't know what to do here.
Yeah.
The judges don't know how to control the media at that point,
Right.
and there's really no way that they can because we have a First Amendment. When judges start trying to do things, it becomes a problem. So it was a very big, a huge First Amendment problem. But we have that situation. We also have another case that I have, and I'm actually being sued in this case in the Northern District of Florida by another influencer, mega influencer on YouTube named Jeremy Hales. And Jeremy Hales didn't like what I had to say. He didn't like what about 10 or 11 other people that have YouTube channels had to say about him, right? That, content creators or journalists, depending on, what they were doing. And he sued 11 people under the Lanham Act, which is the trademarks. The Lanham Act is when you do a trademark. He's saying that what they were doing was affecting his business. Now, think about that. It's speech, and he tried to turn it into a commercial claim. He got laughed out of court, right? The judge dismissed it with prejudice against the defendants on that claim, but it took them a year and a half, 2 years to get it done, right? And so on the in-between, Jeremy Hales is engaging in a practice that I like to call polymop, right?
Yeah.
Polymop is protraction of litigation and multiplication of proceedings. Why? Because he goes on his YouTube channel and he's got, a whole ecosystem of YouTube channels that read everything that gets filed in the court. You have a court notice, you have a motion, you have an order, you have this, you have that, you have a deposition. It becomes perfect content. They don't have to create anything. It's a lawsuit. So this has become lawsuit-driven social media. We see this a lot. There's a lot of these quote-unquote law tubers out there.
Right.
And like you said, as far as platforms go, YouTube is a big one because a lot of people on YouTube want to see this type of stuff. They're drawn to the drama. What's more reality TV than a legal case?
So, but what if you're a person who doesn't have a following against somebody who does? I mean, like me, I'm hoping I have a
find somebody
chance.
like me. You have to find somebody like Frank Parlato. You have to find somebody like Michael Volpe. You got to find somebody like Julie Holborn, right? That will come on in a family court situation and
Well,
cover
it's
your
not
case.
family court. It's
Well, I'm a legal journalist. I'll cover anything. The journalists I just talked about are family court. I will cover. I cover federal court cases. I do a lot of federal court stuff. New York, Florida, anywhere in the country. I've done Colorado, Chicago. If you have a federal court case, if you have any type of interesting litigation case, I write about it. I'm a legal journalist. That's what I do. Frank Parlato does it as well. There are others that do. You have to find yourself somebody that will put you and get your message out there. It's just as much media messaging in 2026 as it is courtroom. It's not like it used to be where none of this stuff is going to be covered. The media is so fragmented. It's not like there are three main networks anymore.
Right.
It's not even like it was just cable news networks. We have so many outlets out there that if you sleep on this and you have a case that you have somebody with a greater microphone, you're going to lose before you even start. And that's a lot of what I do with talking about this stuff. And a lot of my investigative journalism goes into, somebody comes to me with a case that they're getting pilloried on in the media, and they're really not wrong. And they bring me the documents, and I take a look, and I'm like, you aren't wrong. What's going on here? Why is this happening?
Right.
Why are these judges acting this way? Why are these lawyers acting this way? What's the media component? And then we figure it out. And the best weapon is truth. When you start to pump the truth out there and you have a decent enough platform to do it, then things really start to change.
So you said you were in federal court. I'm just curious for defamation. I've had the attorneys argue that defamation is a state claim, But I argue, one of my arguments is that because I'm a California resident and she's an Oregon resident, so you have diversity. Why are you in federal court for defamation? Is it the
Same thing
same?
on
The
cases.
same?
Shirvan is from Mansfield, Pennsylvania, and
Okay.
he focused the defamation on me in Florida because he has other litigation in Florida. He's suing other people in Florida, so he does business down there where he has affairs in Florida. So he's availed himself in Florida, and we have diversity. The other case, Jeremy Hales, he's in the Northern District of Florida. He filed the case in the Northern District of Florida, but he's a resident of Peninsula, Ohio. Okay, he,
Okay.
he does a part of the year, a large part of the year in Otter Creek, Florida, which is in the Northern District. I live in Florida. I live in Southwest Florida. So it was diversity there. He's an Ohio resident. I'm a Florida resident. So two cases, defamation, Florida centered, but it's diversity on both.
Okay. And yeah, I just had a couple other questions. Let me see. So what is your well, one problem too is that it's impossible to get judges recused from a case, but I guess we've been going for a while, of half an hour or so, a little about 40 minutes. So what is your most important message to people in family court or other court to help them, especially for the person who can't afford an expensive attorney? What is your most important message to people?
I would tell you that about recusal. Who decides recusal is the judge. The judge decides whether or not they should be recused.
And they never
So
do.
if it's inside the courtroom and it's just based on papers in a courtroom, no judge is going to recuse themselves. The only way you get a judge to recuse is if you have to go to the media, right? And that's the thing I said. You can defend yourself in court. You're not going to make an offensive move in court. You have no way to do offense in court unless, of course, you have an audio tape of a judge, taking a bribe, or videotape of a judge taking a bribe, at which point I would tell you to go to the media anyway. But the media is the place to go if you want to get any type of movement. If you think a judge is a crooked judge, we've had judges recused, judges that move. I can't tell you the number of judges in family court cases. They're off the case. They move the cases because the media is involved in the case. Now, lawyers may be liabilities in certain instances. That's why I tell people, listen, go call up, Jill Jones Soderman at the Foundation for the Child Victims Family. Call up Dave Weigel and his group, and they'll have court watchers there to pack the courtroom for you. Those type of groups are good, and you may be able to manage, without a lawyer. But there are certain things that you need done. So you need some people that know what they're doing litigation management wise. Like you might need to go get brain scans and to show different types of medical issues. You need to have some type of doctor. I've worked with Dr. Bandy Lee. She's done that. I've worked with Dr. Gregory Hibskin, who's one of the top neuroscientists and medical doctors there are about trauma and brain scans and violence. I've worked with the Amen Clinic, Daniel Amen, about the scans, the brain scans. And those are things that happen whether or not you have a lawyer or not. You need to get those things into the court. Also, you need to work with forensic accounting sometimes. So there's issues there. So you need to know what you don't know. And a lot of times the lawyer is kind of conflicted in the sense that if you only have a limited pot of money,
Right.
and you're paying it all to the lawyer, you don't have any money to go to get the people that you really need.
Right.
To win that case, you might need a forensic expert, or you might need this expert or that expert.
Right.
And your best bet might be just to go hire that expert.
Right. Well,
Right?
and a lot of experts, though, don't work with ProPERS, which is a problem. But
That's
also,
why
like digital forensics, I just paid to have someone do digital forensics on all these videos I have to prove my case against my neighbor. And that was a good thing because they verified that she's had 1,500,000 views, but digital forensics. So I agree that it's probably better for me to pay for the experts than for an expensive attorney. But yeah, but a lot of experts don't work with ProPERS.
that's why I like the Foundation for the Child Victim Family Court. They're built for that purpose. One of the
Oh,
reasons why they're built is because they have experts that work with them on retainer, basically, or in
great.
coordination. And it's they have somebody that comes into the foundation that needs resources. They give them the resources they need, and they introduce them to the experts that could help them.
Oh,
You know,
that's
so
a
it's
great. Is that just what state is that in? Is that
she
specific?
works all around the country. She's
Oh,
FCVFC.org, Foundation for the Child Victims of the Family Courts.
oh,
So
okay, great.
she's a brilliant woman. She's been doing this for years. Has
Mm,
a clinical psychiatry background, you know, psychologist type background. So that's one of the things. The other thing is the value of media. You know, I'm gonna pump what I do. You
yeah.
know, I think we do a great job in the media doing this stuff, especially people who know what they're doing. You know,
Hmm.
you have good journalists that are independent journalists that have been covering this stuff that understand it, know where the points of tensile strength and tensile weakness are. You know, when you put out stories or when you say things, and so it might be as simple as just publishing a few stories about your case. Have some journalists diving into the case to find out what's happening because they don't know how to react to it at the courts or in government when you have people poking around at their work. They don't want people, you know, double checking their work.
Yeah,
They thrive on nobody, you know, putting their eyes over things, you know, keeping
yeah.
things buried. So they change the way they do things when there's media coverage as well. So people have
Hmm.
to understand that basic fact that media coverage is generally a positive thing
Right.
in any situation.
It's just kind of concerning when there's so much censorship going on now that, whether you get justice or not depends on whether you get media or not. I mean, I have a book that I wrote, and I think it's a good book, but I've struggled with getting attention. I went to the Santa Barbara writers conference, and it seems like because I'm talking about the dark side of Santa Barbara that I'm not getting the attention it deserves. So it's been a struggle getting that attention, but maybe I'm not contacting the right people. But you hate to think that whether you get justice or not is dependent upon whether you get attention in the media or not. But I know that that's true to a certain extent, but I'm hoping it's not completely true that the person with the biggest microphone wins automatically. So,
A
so
lot of times that's the case. The person with that has the biggest pile of money as well.
yeah,
So that's the situation. You could what you could do is you could nullify it though in a lot of ways. If you're going against somebody who has the bigger pile of money, you could try to use the bigger media voice or the more intelligent media voice to be
right,
able to have a plan, have a media plan to be able to because lawyers, some lawyers are very good at being lawyers, right, and technical skills and everything else, but they're pretty terrible at media. They're pretty terrible at PR. They're pretty terrible at putting something into a soundbite that people can understand. You know,
mm,
some of the best lawyers out there that I ever saw are the ones that are most relatable.
mm.
You know, you have some of these lawyers that come into court with all these binders all made up all nice, things stacked in here, and you know that somebody paid a lot of money to put all that together.
Yeah,
And then the guy across from them comes in with a yellow pad with a few things scribbled down. And when they get up to in front of the jury, the one who's making the points is the one with the yellow pad because he's
yeah,
telling it how it is. Look, I wouldn't buy a used car from these people. Look what they're trying to sell you. You know, so sometimes you need to be able to talk to the mass audience
right,
correctly. That's the jury boxes. Some of the best lawyers, some of the best litigators are the ones that have that ability. But also
right,
the media itself is an outlet to talk to the people because at the
right.
end of the day, hopefully in America, still the people are sovereign, right? And that's the final check on governmental officials. So that's what you want to be able to do.
Well, I feel like at least people, because of Trump, I noticed you have a picture of President Trump in the background, that because he was treated so unfairly by the courts and made such a big deal. That's, or I could say that better, but because he made that so public and talked about it, that at least people are willing to listen and and willing to believe that the courts aren't necessarily fair. So at least that's open for discussion now, where maybe 10 years ago it wasn't.
We have a crooked system in a lot of places, weaponized justice,
Yeah,
lawfare. The president's doing a great job, but there's a lot of work to be done with the rot of the deep state is real. People don't realize that.
yeah,
It's not this intentional conspiracy like, oh, we're going to be the deep state today. No, but it's a situation where people are protecting their administrative positions. You know,
right.
there's a deep state in every courthouse in this country in the sense that there are people there that are looking out for themselves. The judge club is protecting itself. The clerks are protecting everybody. They're protecting their own little insular group. The cops all protect each other. The lawyers
Right.
protect each other. And when you're working with people and your paycheck depends upon your loyalty, it becomes a situation that's antithetical to justice.
Right.
You add that up, with people with money interests, with public interests, with private interests, everything else. That's when you get at the aggregate of lawfare. And somebody like Trump coming and wanting to shake things up. That's people don't want to hear that. And you saw what he fought. The reason why he fought what he fought was to try to prevent what happened when he came in. USAID, remember USAID?
Yeah.
That was a huge situation. Doge, huge situations where all this money is going out, and it was basically making people rich, and they're not doing anything. It's a form of theft, waste, fraud, and abuse. We're seeing with Nick Shirley, with all the stuff that's happening, not just in Minnesota, but now in California, New York, in Illinois, with these adult daycare centers, with some of these
Right.
things that are getting all this public money. And you wonder where did it come from? How do we get to this point in this country?
Yeah.
And the courts are no different. There's federal funding that goes into these courts. There's federal funding that goes into every court in this country, whether a federal court, a state court, anywhere else, and the state courts even more so because they have budget gaps and they plug them with federal money. And the federal money is depending on showing that they have so many cases, so they just put people into different boxes, just throw them in there, so they get the federal money. That's what
Right.
it is.
Right. Well, I guess we can close if you'd like. What gives you hope? What maybe that's a good ending
Yeah.
statement of, how do we, because it feels like we're in a precarious state in history with what you call the deep state, and it scares me. So what gives you help? How can we feel, the audience feel more positive when we're leaving this discussion about, that they'll be given justice if they ever enter the court?
Well, on one end, you say, George Washington said that as long as one patriot still has his powder dry, then there's hope, right? So
Okay.
that's the issue. We have probably the most amazing governmental structure conceived of in human history of the Constitution. So I think we have to trust in the Constitution and understand that our laws aren't the problem. It's the people that are administering them that are the
Right.
problem. The people that are enforcing them are the problem in many instances. That being said, what gives me hope is when I have a mother or a father that has had terrible things happen to them, that hadn't seen their kids in a while, that just had been through it, and we help them out. We do a little bit of research and we write a story. We write several stories. We ask some questions, and then all of a sudden things change in their life.
Great.
I have people that give great testimonials. Dave Weigel might be the best example. He was going through a 9-year divorce. And
Wow.
I came in with the media and we started asking questions. And not only was it that the divorce ended, the poison in his life was the opposing attorney. His wife's lawyer was the one poisoning him. Now the Dave and his ex-wife are actually cordial. They're co-parenting together.
Great.
They're out of the court system. The kids are happy, and that's what gives me hope. We can
Great.
get people to positive resolutions. At the end of the day, the courts should be doing two things, right? A determination on property, a determination on custody in the family courts, right? That's really what they should do. Anything else with them trying to fix people, trying to do this, that's not what courts should be doing. We're the taxpayers. That's not what we're paid to do either. Let's get back to that. And every time we see the courts do that, I think that gives us hope. Every time
Yeah.
we see common sense prevail, I think that gives us hope. So,
Great. And I came up with the name of my book and podcast because the judge's oath is the due equal right to the poor and to the rich. So, they're not necessarily upholding their oath, but hopefully, like you said, bringing exposure to that will have some effect and influence. So, thank you so much for what you do. It's like that's really great. You said you were a lawyer, but you don't practice anymore.
That's for another podcast. I'm a victim
Okay.
of lawfare. Put it that way.
Okay.
I'm a Trump loyalist. Put it that way. And
Okay.
I lived in New York, and they didn't like me too much.
Uh,
But we'll leave that for another day.
okay. Well, thank you for joining my podcast. I really appreciate it. And again, thank you so much for what you do and coming on. It was
Well,
really a
Cheryl, thank you
pleasure.
for having me, and I'd love to come back anytime you want me.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Have a great day.